This video shows you the step that you must do after harvesting your olives. Many people forget or omit this step. If you do this step, you will find you have your best olives the following year. Here is a tree that I have begun pruning in a particular way, which is the step you should follow. Firstly, you want to remove any hanging down pieces. You don't want any branches going downwards. If you look at this tree, you can see the branches. I have snipped anything growing on them right to the trunk. This is the next step you want to take. You also need to clear the centre of your tree and let light and air be seen when you're in the middle of the tree looking upwards. So begin cutting away the hanging down branches and then shape your tree, taking it smaller inwards if it's overhanging other areas. You don't want any more than 3 or 4 main branches coming from the base, the trunk of the tree. This is the same tree after I have severely pruned it back and reduced both height and width. You may say that's too extreme, but if you look back at my past videos when I've done this with all my olive trees, you will see the following year I had far more olives than ever. And let me just say, this tree will bush out a lot more before the olives begin to produce. And later in this video, you will see a tree I did the same thing to a year later when the olives were ready for harvest. So you will see a big difference once your olives are growing. So don't think, how can olives grow on that tree when there is barely any green or branches? Of course, they were a lot easier to pick as well. And not only that, although there was less tree, they were more densely filled with olives on all the branches, and therefore the olives were better quality than a big tree covered in small olives. Also, when pruning, don't forget that you want to cut out any small thin branches that are going upwards too tall, inwards, or crossing over other branches. You also want space between each of the thin little branches or twig parts because you don't want them crowding. The 3 words to remember is air, light and minimal. Do make good use of the leaves and the wood when you cut them away. You can use them as compost or, as I do, directly on my raised beds or hugelkultur beds. A local farmer will be happy to come and take them off your hands. And of course, the bigger trunks, after drying for a couple of years, will be great for burning for fuel. Now I'm going to show you a much smaller tree a year after I last pruned it, like this. This is what happens after only a year. The trunk that I completely cleared, you can see I have to go and chop all this off. It's growing from the main trunk. And this is an annual job, no matter how much you prune your trees. I'll show you a worse example of a very small tree.
So you need snipping away, and then you come round again and you trim back these long hanging ones that were laden down with the olives. So you want to clip those right back. You don't want any hanging down parts. But this tree, as small as it is, it's probably a little bit taller than me. You can see after only a year how much growth comes, because you've let so much light and air in. Of course it's going to produce more outgrowings. All this is growing on the main trunk. And that's where I'll be till Christmas, doing my 86 olive trees. Another reason for keeping them very small, you keep control of them, and of course then the time that this takes makes it so much easier to pick next year. They may be much lower trees and much thinner trees. By the time I finish, not much growing on them, but they will produce far better olives, and actually more olives, rather than high tall trees that A is much harder to pick, and you may well leave some behind if you're doing the method of knocking them down into net. There'll be many on a very high tree that you might not see, so in the end you'll probably have to climb the tree anyway, and you get much more better quality olives doing it my method. Again, inside this thinner branch will probably go, just want 3 or 4 main coming out the base. Make sure they go off different directions and get rid of anything else. Let the light in through the top and the middle, and don't have them going out too wide either. Straight away you can see the hanging down bit. Need to cut that off.
The last 2 years I've made piles of the remnants, but this year I'm going much slower cutting my trees and literally snipping the parts with secateurs, the smaller parts, as I go. So these piles I've actually been dealing with before this year's crops of olives had to be picked. But doing it the way I'm doing now, literally snipping each bit I cut off and putting it in a wheelbarrow before I continue with the next tree. That way I won't have these big piles to deal with. Plus these piles turned brown before using them, which means this year if I snip straight away small parts from the trees and add them to my hugelkultur beds or my raised beds, that provides green. And as you will know, with compost you will actually make layers of brown, green, brown, green. The perfect mulch. It also protects plants from the sun, and if you have a cold climate, it protects them from that too. Be sure to catch my lives every single day of December, random times. Catch me if you can.